All right. Hola, welcome. Hello, everybody. I'm now going to give people just maybe another minute to join the panel so that we don't start and have people miss some of the good stuff that we're about to talk about. But my name is Angela Lugo-Thomas, and I'll be the moderator for this next hour and a half. So just want to make sure everybody's in the right place. We are discussing market studies, messaging, and gentrifying neighborhoods, the unique challenges facing Black food co-ops. And this is a Black-only attendee panel discussion. Hi. Hola.
Hello, hello.
So I'm going to try to see if I can have the chat going at the same time as without it looking crazy. It looks like it's about 11 of us here. So let's give another minute or so. 101. So I'm excited to be here anyway, because this would have been my first in-person up and coming food co-op conference. And I'm so sad that we're not in person, but at least I'm learning, and this is, really good for me because I'm kind of new to the board, learning co-ops. And so all of your knowledge and information has been like blowing my mind today. And yesterday I was just overwhelmed with everything that was going on with some of the panels and some of the discussions that were happening. So I really appreciate everybody really sharing and being open and just we're all growing together. That's pretty much it. So we're gonna probably start in another 30 seconds. Let's see. Well, it's 11 participants. It hasn't changed. So I'm assuming that people probably signed up and they're gonna watch it later like I did with a bunch of other topics. Because it was like, I was checking every mark on the thing, like, oh, I can't be in 3 places at one time, even though I try. But so we're going to go ahead and get started, and hopefully other people will be able to watch this afterwards and gain some information and some tips and some gems that they can take away and use in their own communities. So first, I'm going to ask everyone if you would kindly in the chat. I always want to just do a quick little icebreaker and tell me what's the most interesting place you've ever visited. And it could be in your city, it could be in your state, another state, or internationally. And I would say for myself, I never get tired of going to Niagara Falls. That's probably one of the places that even if I go 10 times, I'm still like in amazement of what it looks like and just the awe of it. So I would say Niagara Falls would be mine. And I see a couple. Oh man, never been to Mozambique, Guatemala either. That would be wonderful. Serengeti. Oh my gosh, you guys have really been places. Oh, the shrine. Oh, in Lagos, Nigeria. That's wonderful. So I'm going to just introduce myself really quickly. So my name is Angela Lugo-Thomas, and I live in a small community called Highland Park. It's right in the center of Detroit, Michigan. And I'm part of the board of the future Detroit People's Food Co-op. And I'm also one of the co-chairs for the Membership Outreach Committee. And I live in Highland Park with my family. I have 3 girls, and I've been married a little bit over 20 years now. And so I'm excited to join you all today, for all of you to be here and to do this panel discussion. And one of the things that was really interesting when I was looking at everybody's information of who's going to be on the panel is I have a little bit of connection to everybody's place wherever you are at. So my mother was born in Cleveland, and my grandmother and my grandfather, who was born in Pittsburgh, they met in New York. So that's where they met. And then they moved to Puerto Rico, and that's where I was born. So I have a little connection to everybody that's on the panel, and all those places are places that I love to visit whenever I get a chance. So I'm excited to hear more about the projects that all of you are involved in. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about why we're doing this panel. So in my lifetime, I'm 49, and in my lifetime, I don't recall a time where Black people are as centered as we are in this recent past year. It just seems like it's really a focus on just empowering and supporting Black people. And there was a PDF that went around Detroit, and I don't know if it went across the country, but it was about centering Black people in community development. And someone made a comment in that PDF that struck me, and they said, for Black communities, 2021 offers an opportunity to seize the moment and test the commitment from businesses, government, and philanthropy to do better by us. So when when I read that, it reminded me of my husband always saying, well, we got to test the system. We got to push the envelope. We got to see, are they just talking, or are they going to really, put some effort behind what they're saying? And so the group that's with us today, there's a wealth of knowledge on the panel. They know this work. I mean, I was reading your bios oh man, y'all have so much experience. And then, some of us are still, at the point where we're not quite open in the food co-op space. But I just feel like we can all learn from each other. The people that will watch this, we all come from different experiences, different knowledge base. And so there might be some things that you've heard before. So, just be patient and just listen to it. And then if there's anyone that's in this group that wants to contribute to what we're talking about, please feel free to add it to the chat. I won't be able to probably monitor it too much, but I will try to answer some questions if they come up. And as well as if you come up with any information that you want to share with the other participant, please add it to the chat area. So what we'll do is we'll let the panelists have an opportunity to introduce themselves. So I would like each person to just give a little bit of, brief bio of who you are, what co-op or organization you represent. And then, if you have a slide presentation, you can do it right after you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about yourself. If you don't, then we can move on to the next person, and then we'll go into some of the questions that I'm going to ask you today. So who would like to begin?
I can volunteer to go first. Okay, hopefully everyone can hear me. And my name is Angela Sayles. I am representing the Little Africa Food Cooperative. We're based here in Cleveland, Ohio. A little bit about my background. I consider myself a triple threat because I bring about 25 years of corporate experience, as well as 20 years of academic instruction, academic experience. I teach at the university level, and I'm also an entrepreneur. So I have 3 lanes. In terms of the food space, I really am in the food space from 3 different angles. One, I got together with my partners and we began to start the Little Africa Food Co-op, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as we address the issues. I'd like to share my presentation. But I have a shared vision, with our founder around us taking ownership and feeding ourselves. And so I got involved in the beginning as a business consultant, because I am a financial person, and I came on, and because we both believe in this, all of us, we just decided to work together. And then also, I've had the opportunity to make presentations internationally. I presented financial sustainability in agribusiness at the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women in New York City. And I've been participating in that platform for about 5 years now. And then just on a personal level, as a Black woman, dealing with weight and just health, and trying to figure out how to maintain a good profile and be a mother and be a professional. I mean, it's personal as well. And so those are some of the reasons that I'm here and, into the food space. So Angela, I don't know if I should go into my presentation or yes? Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Bear with me just 1 second. Here it is, okay. Please let me know if you can see it. Give me a thumbs up if you see it. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the topic here today, which is market studies, messaging, and gentrifying neighborhoods, and what unique challenges we face as Black food cooperatives, and what the participants should expect today really is an uncut discussion about what is happening on the ground in our communities. Simply. Trying to advance the slide. Okay, so self-determining food economies is something that we were asked to address. The first question is, what is that? For Little Africa Food Co-op, self-determining food economy means how our communities live and benefit from the food we grow. And when we say benefits, that to us includes price points, how much we're actually paying for food and the quality of it, locations and access of how we get food. I don't have to reiterate the issues, we know what those are. And also benefits of land ownership and sovereignty, which is becoming more and more of a conversation in our particular communities, because we want to grow food, but in many cases it's been challenging to get ownership of the land. We can only lease it, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. It also means self-determining, also means for us, by us. One of my team members said it's owned by us and grown by us, and I like that, so I put that in quotes. Also, it means that we circle, cycle, and recycle our Black dollars. And so when we hear the term self-determining food economies, that's what it means to us. So what our talk about today is really some challenges to self-determination. And some of the things that I would like to just address is gentrification, scarcity, and power systems in that context. So what are some of the impact and challenges to the community as it pertains to gentrification? And I do want to just express that I didn't put this information together on my own. I consulted with my team. So as I bring the information, it's a collective voice that you hear, not just mine alone. But one of the things that we find is that the community sometimes is in its own way, because we say we need things and want things, but we might not be participating and actively involved in things, such as coming to the meetings and participating in the forums. And so really, getting that participation. Another one of the challenges we discussed is the conglomerate nonprofit organizations in the community. And I think Baba Malik and Dara touched on this earlier in their discussion. For example, here in our city, we just know that the food banks, which are actually nonprofit organizations, they're showing us that they're more interested in increasing their bottom line versus really servicing the people. They're giving the people minimal stuff, but the food is not of good quality. The service is not of good quality, and they're getting huge grants and funding to do that. And so that is a challenge for us, you know, in the cities. Someone on my team used these words, fake leadership, and I added gatekeepers in disguise. We've just had several instances in our city where people, we're collaborative, we're cooperative, and we're genuinely that. And so when we come to you and come to the tables because we want to work together, because these issues are so big, we can't resolve them alone. I mean, we have to be cooperative in our approach. And so some of our people that we've attempted to partner with, they'll embrace us at first, and then they change, you know. And so determining where we fit in the community as a Black-led co-op in the context of gentrification is interesting, because some of our gatekeepers that are working with other institutions, once they get a check, or once they work with us and we give them the formula and then they can go out and get a check, then, you know, they kick us to the curb and then begin to push their agenda versus, you know, really asking the people what they need. Yes, they do like to take our ideas. And so we have several examples of that, but that happens and is happening. And so those are some of the challenges that we're dealing with on the ground. And they just want to make us do what they want us to do. And we're simply, you know, we're not having it. You know, so in light of that, you know, there's scarce resources. And, you know, I just wanted to talk about innovation and scarcity. Because as Baba Malik and Dara talked about earlier, there is a lot of money, but it's kept in a network. I don't want to call it the good old boys network, because maybe that might be changing a little bit, but it's kept into a network that we're not in. I think Dara said out of all nonprofits, around 8% are led by Black people. That means 92% are not led by Black people. So therefore, those dollars are not coming to us. And even when we apply, they may quote capacity building as a reason that they do or don't grant it to you. And so it's just like anything, it's hard to get over that hump. But in scarcity comes innovation, because when you're determined to make something work, you figure it out. And that's what we do. So, you know, at Little Africa, we really work on the power of collaboration. I mean, we've been able to serve as a conduit to various community partners. For example, we went into a partnership with 3 organizations here in our city. One is a community center, Harvard Square Center. St. Luke's is a home for elders. And then also we partnered with the Union Miles Development Corporation, which is one of our CDCs. And so, you know, what we have done is really just create a holistic approach for people in the community. And that, you know, means that we need to determine the niche for each person that's collaborating. What can everyone bring? So in that case, when we were beginning to service during our emergency food response program that really came out of the COVID situation, you know, each one of our partners brought something. So the CDC sponsored hygiene kits for us. The community center was able to, you know, bring the food, and then Little Africa came in with the delivery and distribution service, coordination, logistics, and we put the and our drivers, and so we were able to expand the scope. So that's just the example of how you take the people and the resources you have and put them together to be able to, you know, have a greater impact. Another thing that we just reflected on, you know, how do we overcome it? How do we overcome scarce resources and scarcity is just knowing that we are who we are. Little Africa Food Cooperative is a woman-led co-op, a Black woman-led co-op. And, you know, as Black women, we just find a way. That's what we do. We make ways out of no ways. You know, they always say we try to make $1 out of 15 cents. That's true. Even the other morning, you know, we were at Miss Mickey's house, and she had like 5 eggs, 1 bagel, 3 English muffins, an avocado, and we fed 7 people with that, you know. We spread it out and all of us had a good breakfast. And so, you know, simply it's just, we take lemons and we make it into lemonade, and we make it into lemon tea, and we make it into lemon ginger for healing, and we make it into lemon pie for cleaning. So, you know, that's what we do.
I'll re-roll.
Yes, yes, yes. Next, I just wanted to talk about power systems, and not to even talk about the problem of power systems, but talk about the remix. I'm calling it the power systems remix. What does that mean? One of the initiatives that I'm working on here in Cleveland in collaboration with Case Western Reserve University, they have a food fellowship mentoring program. And so we're serving as mentors to some of the residents that have projects. And out of some of those discussions has come the need for resident and community group-based ecosystems. You know, the residents want to have sovereignty. They want to grow the land. They want to be able to do things on their own, but they don't have a voice. They don't have the resources. And so, you know, one of our ideas is really to support those resident and community group-based ecosystems and join them to the larger co-op networks, because we may be at certain places where we can leverage our platforms, and also, you know, help to advocate policies and make recommendations. And so it's really about connectivism. So that's one of the things that, you know, we're wanting to continue by putting power back in the hands of the people. And that's at all aspects of the food supply chain, from growing to producing, to actually aggregating, selling, and procuring. In some ways, you know, those things can be done through homesteading. Community land trust is a huge discussion going on here in our city. And also we need to consider external sources of food internationally, and opening up, you know, that as part of the food ecosystem. Of course, we need to do what we can do in the cities, urban ag, and we need to, you know, work with our national Black farmers, but we also need to look at procuring food outside of the country. And so that's where we bring some newness to the discussion. And then finally, I just wanted to talk about cooperating cooperatively. And I'm so proud of yesterday. This picture is from yesterday. This is Little Africa in Gem City at the grand opening of Gem City Market. And so, you know, we got to help each other. Like, you know, what does that mean? It really means, you know, identifying your partners. And sometimes that takes a while to know who's who, because everybody gives you their representative in the beginning. So you got to kind of test and try with folks and see who's still standing with you after a while. And then you synergize with those people that are standing. Of course, all of these words are action words: communicating, successioning. I don't know if that's a word, but I think, you know, successioning has to do with succession planning, and doing that in the beginning, because maybe we don't want to retire running a grocery store. Maybe we want to replicate our model in other cities. Maybe we want to go on to other projects, but we want the food cooperatives to keep going. So we need to, you know, do that in a cooperative way. Face-to-facing, you know, Zoom is good, phone is good, but there's nothing like showing up, you know, and getting that energy. And so I know one of our sisters, I don't know if she's in the conference, but Sister Rakiba Bay, who is part of our network, wanted to put together like a co-op tour for this summer. So I hope that we're going to do that. And we said Little Africa jumped it off with the visit to Dayton. Continuing, just not giving up, and winning. When we have our wins, we should accomplish, celebrate them, you know, and celebrate one another. And at the end of the day, supporting one another in real time. And so, you know, that's what us cooperating cooperatively, you know, means to us. I think I had, oh, wait a minute. I got one last slide. It went off. So you can see who the team is. That's us, the ladies of Little Africa. So thank you for giving us the opportunity. And these are our websites and our email. I guess they'll be on the recording. Check us out. And then I'll be available for any questions. Thank you, Angela, for giving me these moments. Thank you.
I love it. I love learning about all these new co-ops and activities happening. So then when I travel, I can visit y'all. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And we'll be chatting more after the next presenter. Mr. Mark, would you like to go?
Sure, thank you. And I just want to make sure that I do have screen sharing capabilities, right? All right, cool.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. At least it's afternoon here in Brooklyn. My name is Mark Winston Griffith. I wear a few different hats, but I'm the executive director of the Brooklyn Movement Center, and I am the founding board member of the Central Brooklyn Food Co-op, and I'm also on the leadership team of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. So personally, I identify as a community organizer, as someone who started the Brooklyn Movement Center and has been doing organizing work, I guess what you can call community development work. I've been a journalist, have done public policy now for over 3 decades. So, I'm a little long in the tooth and have some experience, but, I consider myself a lifelong learner and still learning new things every day. So what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is just sort of walk us through a quick presentation that I have that is similar in format to what Angela just presented. And so I'll get that started right now. So, again, name is Mark Winston Griffith, and I want to talk to you from the vantage point of being with the Brooklyn Movement Center and the Central Brooklyn Food Co-op. And specifically, I want to address one area within the title of this panel, which is gentrifying neighborhoods, and speak very specifically to the challenges that we're facing, but not only that, what we're doing to address that. Oops, hold on. Okay. So just to let you know, what I'll be covering during this session is talking a little bit about the origins of the Brooklyn Movement Center and Central Brooklyn, our cooperative values, and the Central Brooklyn Food Co-op. I want to talk about the threat that we're facing in Central Brooklyn as far as displacement, what we broadly call gentrification, but more specifically, the erasure of Black people here. And then how we are responding to that within the framework of something that we call the Campaign for Black Brooklyn. Just so you know what the Brooklyn Movement Center and the Central Brooklyn Food Co-op are. The Brooklyn Movement Center is about 10 years old. When we talk about Central Brooklyn, we are identifying neighborhoods, contiguous Black neighborhoods, Bedford-Stuyvesant, Crown Heights, Brownsville, Flatbush, and the surrounding area that is basically known as Black Brooklyn. And the Brooklyn Movement Center is Black-led, we're Black-centered, and we're membership-based. So as people join the organization to become stakeholders, and we try to build a pretty vigorous democracy around how things get done as far as building power for Central Brooklyn. We're multi-issue and intersectional. We focus on a few different sort of issue fronts, and we talk about community safety, but it's really about police accountability, and not only talking about how do we deconstruct or dismantle the police apparatus and the carceral system, but how do we build new things in its place so that our neighborhoods our communities we're keeping ourselves safe and healthy. We do tenant organizing, we organize around environmental justice, and we do food sovereignty. And within that framework of food sovereignty, we started organizing the Central Brooklyn Food Co-op some years ago. And what is unique about the Central Brooklyn Food Co-op is that we're 100% member owner, which means that if you shop at the Central Brooklyn Food Co-op, it means that you are also a member of it, and which means that you are a part owner of the institution. We're in organizing right now. We are not set to open until next year. I have to giggle when I say that because I've been presenting on the Central Brooklyn Food Co-op for several years, and every time I present, I always say that we're a year out from organizing, from opening, I should say. So, but I think that we're almost there, but the pandemic really sort of held us back. But I think we've got some momentum now. So for some reason, so real quickly, when we talk about Central Brooklyn, we're talking about the largest urban concentration of Black people in the country. And what is important to root us in this conversation is this history of Black self-determination that, that Central Brooklyn has been known for. This has been in the form of political organizing. Right there, there's a picture. Oh, well, actually, let me go back one. What you see there is a picture of some Black business people who were operating in Weeksville, which is in Central Brooklyn, which is one of the oldest, which was one of the first freestanding Black communities that was populated by free Black folks in the early 1800s. Also, as we know, after the Second World War, you had the Great Migration, and Central Brooklyn became then a mecca for Black folks. This organizing that we've been doing, it goes way back. There's a picture of a demonstration in Ocean Hill, Brownsville in Brooklyn, where Black people in an act of self-determination ended up causing the largest strike, public educational strike in the country at that time. We're known for the African Street Festival and cultural organizing. I don't know if those of you who've heard of it, of African Street Festival, but it's something that was based in Bedford-Stuyvesant, has since moved. But every year, thousands of people converge on Central Brooklyn to, for cultural events, for commerce, and for community. Right here is a newspaper article from 1909 that talks about a food co-op that was started by Black folks in 1909. It says the cooperative grocery is planned by Negroes. So this is something that's in our blood, it's in our DNA, something we've been doing for literally more than a century. Right there is a picture of the Paragon Credit Union, which was a Black-owned credit union that was started by Garveyites in the late 30s and early 40s that had a huge impact on Central Brooklyn. Right there's a picture of the Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation, which was the first community development corporation in the country. Right there's a picture of me back in 1993 when I started the Central Brooklyn Federal Credit Union, which was the largest Black-owned federal credit union at that moment. So the point is that there's a long history of this work in Central Brooklyn. But what we're facing right now is a huge change. Whereas Bedford-Stuyvesant was at one point in time more than, approaching 90% or more than 90% Black and Latino, some sections of Bedford-Stuyvesant actually have less than 50% Black people. And that's been happening over the last few decades. And this picture is a home that was foreclosed on some years ago. And so, the foreclosure crisis was one of the greatest transfers of wealth out of Black communities in the country. And Central Brooklyn, where you have a fairly high rate of home ownership, was devastated by that. And so, we've been fighting this gentrification, Black folks here, for probably going back 10 years now, as we've seen, 10, 15 years that we've seen these shifts happening. No more is this picture of displacement of Black culture happening more than in the form of food. Right there is Wholesome Food Market, which is a few blocks from me. And that is, you can just tell by the vibe and what they sell there. Everything is geared towards newcomers, young people, white folks, everyone but Black folks. And so the frontier, where the fight is happening in terms of cultural ownership of Black people, the cultural ownership by Black people, and building institutions that reflect us and that can literally feed us, it really begins in some ways with food and how it's sold and how it's sourced in Brooklyn. So the Brooklyn Movement Center is actively building a campaign we call the Campaign for Black Brooklyn, where we're doing an all sort of a holistic kind of approach to trying to make sure that there is a political, economic, and cultural plan for Black people, not just surviving in Central Brooklyn, but thriving, so that there is a future for Black people in Central Brooklyn. One of those things that we're doing is we some years ago, we started the Central Brooklyn Food Co-op. And originally there was this conversation, we don't use the term anymore. No one uses the term food desert anymore. And what it's been replaced by is food redlining and food apartheid. And nowhere is that more present than with Central Brooklyn Food Co-op and our efforts, because here you see food in Central Brooklyn, again, has been assigned. The first supermarkets left Brooklyn, and now they're coming back, but they are there to serve certain people. And so the food co-op is designed to be Black-led and to make sure that Black people are centered in the conversation and in food delivery in Central Brooklyn. So I want to just try to answer a question. How do you build a food co-op future when the Black people in the neighborhood are disappearing before you? This is a picture. You may see Dara. You may notice Dara in the middle there on the bottom row. This is when she identified with Central Brooklyn. She has since moved on, but we won't hate on her for that. But this is a picture of a retreat that we had maybe 6 years ago, and you can see that it's, on some level it's held down by Black people, but also there are other folks in the mix. And so this is like a visual representation of sort of the struggle that we're going through right now. So I'm going to talk about some of the ways we're trying to address this disappearance. One is by placemaking, right? Talking about building a future of joy, resilience, and safety in Central Brooklyn in a way that goes beyond food, so that no one is going to stay in a neighborhood simply because of the food that is being provided there, or being part of a food co-op, but feeling like there's a neighborhood around them that is cultivating their health, their well-being, and their safety. And so that's what we're trying to do. And that goes to all the different projects and issue organizing that we're doing. We're also trying to build sort of reconstruct the Black food system in Central Brooklyn, so that we're not just building a place where you shop for food, but also tie it to Black farmers, Black distributors, everyone in between. So from farm to table, you have Black people who are part of the food ecosystem in Central Brooklyn. And so we created something called the Central Brooklyn Food Democracy Project, which is an attempt to put the food co-op at the middle of this value chain, food chain, again, from growers to distributors to consumers. We have to organize, right? We can't just establish the food co-op and expect that people will come, because when we do that, what we find out, straight talk, is that mostly white people come. And so what we've got to do is be very explicit and very proactive about hiring organizers and going door to door to events and talking to Black people very directly about what we're trying to do. We have an intentional membership, so that membership is open to everybody, but we have something called core membership and solidarity membership. Now, we don't say that to be a core member you have to be Black, but that is in some ways the underlying message there. And so the idea is that we say that if you are directly impacted by the issues that we work on, you are a core member. You are the one in leadership. You are the ones who this institution is focused on. And as a solidarity member, you are there to support. And through our orientations, we make that very clear. Now, that is something we do at the Brooklyn Movement Center, but that's something we're also trying to bring to the food co-op as well. We're doing community building. So we have, for instance, this is a flyer from something called Black Radicals at Play. And so we're trying to build a social and cultural ecosystem around food where people feel comfortable about it, where they're very free to be Black, to do what Black people do, to eat Black food, and to, again, create space for ourselves. We do political education. And so we try to tie a lot of issues that we're talking about, political issues, to food. So it could be about the carceral system. It could be about food in schools. All that we do, we talk about, trying to tie it back to food. It could be about the environment. And so we have these events where people bring their own dishes, we fellowship, we literally break bread, and we have conversations around how do we change the political and social and cultural system here in Central Brooklyn, centering food. And then lastly, what we do is we create Black-owned spaces in very much the same way this up and coming conference created this Black space for us to talk so that we feel safe, that we feel free, that we can center our Black joy and our Black liberation. That is what we're trying to do with the food co-op as well. So for instance, we had a retreat recently where everyone was invited to the retreat, but we carved out a space during that time for just Black identified people to have conversations. And so, I've kind of rushed through this, but the whole idea is, I'm glad I finished on this point because we're trying to create a space for Black people where they're not only do they belong, but they create, we get to determine our own future in our own image in a way that's proactive. That is, we can't just wait for, we can't just say we want a Black community and expect it to happen on its own. We have to set up the institutions, the systems, and the mechanisms to make sure that that happens. So that's my presentation. Mark Winston Griffith, that is my email address if you want to contact me. And thank you for this opportunity. I'm really looking forward to having a really robust conversation around this. And so I will pass it to you, Angela, and or Jamila.
This was amazing, and thank you for that history. I feel like I need you to do a separate whole lecture series on that because wow, I mean the similarities. Every when you were talking, I'm like, dang, that's what's happening here. Dang,
exactly. It's universal.
It's universal, and we're struggling now. And as you know, you've been in this for a while, and so has the Detroit People's Food Co-op. 10 years going, right. And the neighborhood that we're going to be in has transition to something else now. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll definitely be talking some more. Mm-hmm. And last but not least, to introduce and talk a little bit. Thank you, Ms. Jamila.
Thank you. I'm so hyped. Thanks to both Angela's and Mark for helping to get us set up here. Go Brooklyn all day, every day. I'm in Philly now, I know, but I'm from Brooklyn, and I'm just really, thanks Mark for sharing all of that context. So my name is Jamila Medley. I come to this work by way of, I'm officially coming into this conference through my role with the Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance, where I'm the executive director, just for a couple more weeks, actually, because I'm transitioning from that role at the end of May this year. I'm also a consultant with Illuminate. And why am I here? I'm not helping to start a food co-op. I'm not a part of a Black-led food co-op point. But I think some of the ways in which my experience seeing and hearing from you all, just kind of want to take it a little meta, right? And in the sense of what we're talking about in terms of the messaging, in terms of the of thinking about gentrification and the role of Black folks in cooperation and building out a co-op movement. So I'm going to frame a little bit my own background I got introduced to cooperatives as a business model and as an entire thing back in 2012 when I started working at a grocery store food co-op in Philadelphia. And it was a food co-op located in a historically Black community that was also rapidly experiencing gentrification. And this food co-op actually is now 50 years old. They've recently celebrated or about to celebrate their 50th anniversary. So it's an older food co-op that since its inception until 2012 was actually closed to the public. So this is a food co-op situated in a majority Black community that historically has been multiracial and multi-class, but culturally and in practice and in policy is a white-led institution. that was closed to the majority Black community surrounding it that it has been in. And in 2012, they did, probably around 2009 or so, though, they did start a conversation around expansion. And part of that expansion was also going to be about opening up to the public, right? And so that anybody who wanted to shop in that grocery store could start doing so. And so, my initial experience coming into that food co-op was one of seeing it be a white food co-op, where there, even though our neighbors, other businesses around us, people who lived in the most immediate vicinity, it's also in the neighborhood of a major Ivy League University of Pennsylvania. It's right in that neighborhood. And so there's a lot of wealth and affluence and a lot of white folks also living in that neighborhood as well. And one of the first things that I remember about the experience there was that I started working there as the store had just relaunched, right? They opened up in March with their expansion. I started there as the membership coordinator in June. And so part of my job was to recruit and attract more people to join the co-op. And two factors really played into this that I think connect to what this panel is about. And one is the market study, right? Where there were elements, when we look at what historically and traditionally it has taken to successfully open and sustain a food co-op. We'll never see this in print, right? But what it really usually means is that there needs to be a certain level of affluence and wealth in the community. Often that affluence and wealth belongs to white people, and that the primary shopper who's going to support that co-op is an affluent, educated white woman, right? And so this is the demographic that was part of this community also, where I was working and living at the time as well. And simultaneously, there was this challenge of also the co-op fully wanting to kind of take its own positionality and being aware of its own position as a community-based organization, as an anchor institution in the business corridor there, but also knowing that it was playing into and contributing to the displacement of Black folks from that community, and also as an arbiter of gentrification. And so these tensions, right, immediately, are arising as we're looking at what is going to be true for many of the Black-led food co-ops that are developing now, right? That they are Black-led, but they are also in communities that are rapidly gentrifying and that are going to have multiracial and multi-class customer bases. And so at the kind of crux of that experience is really, I think, this notion of what a lot of the work is around reclamation of our role, our historic role in the creation and utilization of the co-op business model in our communities to address our needs. And that this work is not new for us in our communities, right? And so when we are aiming to create and sustain our food co-ops, also noting who else we're in community with, the immediate kind of crux is like sustaining and maintaining our leadership and our positionality in these new businesses. And it's a broader movement work, right? I think as we look at and consider a lot of the work that happens around outreach and messaging for co-ops, a lot of it is often geared towards opening a store. And the work that I do every day with the Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance is really about shifting a narrative from co-op creation solely to create enterprises, businesses, but to really engage and think about the strengthening of the associations of people who are coming together, using the co-op business model, using democratic practice, right, and democratic organizing methods to create and sustain businesses that will best serve their communities and meet community needs. So this messaging and this shift that our co-ops have to really move towards is really about movement building. And as Mark was saying, like, we got to target our folks, right? But we also have to invite them into something that's deeper than a shopping experience, right? We're inviting people into a way of thinking about our liberation, our collective liberation, and how we take care of ourselves and one another through, and that the food co-op, the site of our grocery store, is an extension of that practice of how we're coming together and doing that. I'll stop there.
Yes, all of that. Wow. So you're a member of that co-op though that you started to work with, or?
Yes, I am still a member at that co-op. I'm also a member. I have since moved into a different community that also has a food co-op here that is reckoning with many of the same challenges.
Thank you so much, everybody. All right, so we're going to get into some of the questions that just came up just based on the title of this panel discussion. So for everybody's, everybody is on the same page. So market study research is the process of determining the viability of a new service or product through research conducted directly with potential customers. Market research allows a company to discover the target market and get opinions and other feedback from consumers about their interest in the product or service. So you've all kind of described a little bit about the community around where your food co-op is. And so we kind of have a good gist of that. How did you all approach the ones that are trying to open a food co-op? How do you approach your market research in that area where your co-op is starting?
Angela, you want to go?
Sure, thank you. Well, first I'll tell you a little bit about the area that we are focusing in. It is probably somewhere close to 80% of the residents live below the poverty line. And so it's kind of a very difficult area. Most of the families receive SNAP and EBT benefits. I think 8 and 10 of the residents receive some type of benefits. And so they've lost 2 grocery stores within the past year and a half. So, and there's a lot of housing projects in that area. It's about 17,000 residents there. And so that has just made for a kind of I hate to say desperate, but it is a desperate situation. Like, people cannot walk to fresh produce. They can't walk to fresh prepared foods. They can walk and get burgers, chicken, food from the gas station, snacks, all of that. But they have to find transportation to get to the nearest grocery store, which is a challenge for a lot of our elders. Also for some of our single moms and dads who have multiple children, and if they don't have a car, it's hard. You can't, walk in with bags of groceries. But anyway, that's what we're dealing with in our area. And we had a market/feasibility study done. And when it came back, they said that it would be feasible to have a co-op in the community, but it needed to be like 3,000 square feet, which is like a convenience store. We're like, okay. I mean, they base that, and I'm giving a slightly different angle on this because they base that on their historical methodologies of collecting data. I don't think the lady even came to the community, but the professionals, that came out are not Black. And they, have probably used data collection databases from, wherever they're getting their data from, and then came up with some conclusions and recommendations. And that's cool, but we have more insights than, I hate to say the professionals, but I mean, we live with our people. And I think there's an asset that we have called culture that is not factored into the market studies per se, right? Because market studies take grocery spending patterns, location, different product lines, maybe eating habits, something of that nature. But we know the money is there in the community because liquor stores are thriving, gas stations are thriving, the lottery and, all of said things, they're getting very wealthy. And so just in general with the market studies, I think there is a gap, or at least I'm going to call it a gap, but there's also a need to incorporate some of our insights into those studies, because we're Black people. We know what we like to eat. We know how we like to cook it. And those things aren't factored into the study. So there's a cultural component missing. We know that it will do well. So I'm not to negate the market study by the professional, but I think it's not complete. And we believe that a 10,000 square foot, co-op would do well in that community because the grocery store did well. You're on mute, Angela? I'm sorry. I'm not hearing you.
Okay, can you hear me?
I hear you now, yes.
So you all didn't do your own market studies. You kind of relied on what was going on with other, like you had a company come in and do it?
Yeah, we were working in collaboration with the steering committee who financed it. But we also did some data collection of our own. And we just basically wanted to know if people would support a grocery store in their community. And they're screaming, yes, please, yes, please, yes.
And where it was going to be located and how big it would be then?
Well, our questions didn't center around size, but location, yes. And not specific location, but they wanted to be on a bus line or, within walking distance. So certain attributes of the location, but not the location itself. And so, adequate parking, things like that. Ease of use. And so, and on a main street, certain things like that were the questions that we asked. And so we did get some insights to that. So I would say that the information we got has some value, but I think there's a need for us to put our own together. And the reason why we have to consult professionals, because when you go to funders, you got these, couple Black women that are interested and loving on the community, and they're like, well, who are you? So that's why you have to have certain credibility with these institutions. And so it puts you in a bit of a conundrum to bring your own, data source and data collection to get that credibility, and have to couple it with who they respect when they're going to loosen up those dollars.
Yes. Thank you. Anyone else want to add to that about how you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would, I'd love to hear from Jamila, because I think she knows a lot about this subject and mentioned something before. But one of the things I just want to bring up is that we had a really robust and great conversation about this a few weeks ago. The National Black Food and Justice Alliance held a webinar, and we have the recording. And so I think that we spent an hour and a half going deep into this conversation. So wanted to just say that for us, I have to admit, we never did consult with an outside firm, other than we worked with some Pratt students, some planning students at Pratt Institute, who did a market study for us that I guess you say was somewhat low budget, and did not necessarily have the professional sort of seal of approval on it. But we also did our own market research as an organization that was participatory, where we had our members go out and we walked about 600 residents through a series of questions that were going to help us. So very much along the lines that Angela was talking about before, that helped us get to what their food preferences were, their shopping habits, where they lived, and how far they're willing to travel. a whole series of things that have informed how we're framing our, not our mission, but our operations right now. I imagine that we may have to update that because it's a few years old. But one of the things that came out of the conversation around market studies is exactly what Angela was saying, is that there's not only is there a white framework and bias that is oftentimes baked into these market studies, but unfortunately, there's not a really wide and deep history of Black co-ops doing their thing. And so, I wish we had more sort of historical data to rely on as far as our own co-ops. But hopefully in another 10 years, that's going to look very different. But in the meantime, let me just pass off to Jamila to see what she has to say.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that is my understanding of the crux of the challenge, is that because our communities in recent history haven't really utilized this model, the 30, 40 plus years of data collection that has happened on what it means to have a successful grocery co-op has not included us. It hasn't included the variables of our communities, the demographics of our communities. And so the go-to folks who do that work for food co-ops, they don't have a lot to, they have information to go on that isn't immediately transferable to our communities, which can then, demonstrate outcomes that don't look successful for our communities. But it also demonstrates like entire components of our communities, as Angela and Mark alluded to, that they're just missing, and we become invisibilized from the actual study ourselves, right? So part of the opportunity really in like all of this work that y'all are doing is like, it's new, it is emergent, and it is the data that should be being collected and mined and studied. And I'm not sure what is happening on that front. How is this information, this data that is going to be collected, going to intentionally be supporting the next crop of food co-ops in Black communities to come, or for the ones who are going to open after 2022, right? How are they going to be learning from the co-ops that opened in 2021 and in 2022, the ones that opened in the past? How do we build up systems to ensure that the data and the variables that are impacting market feasibility for Black-led co-ops, how is that going to become available for these future enterprises?
Yes. Yeah, actually what's so funny is to hear the last time we had a food co-op was probably more than 20 years ago. And my mother was a member, and nothing had happened since then. And you would think in a city that's 80% plus Black, that they would have been something by now. It's taken us a long time for this one, but it makes you wonder, like, why is that not a more common thing to see, more cooperatives and more food related cooperatives? Because as we know in our communities, we've done cooperatives in different ways, where we, everybody bring your kids over here and I'll take care of them while you go to work or whatever. So there's been, different versions of it, but not around food. And in Detroit, it is majority like the organizations. I remember when I first started gardening, and I used to be like, why is it that all these people are white? Like, it was just the weirdest thing. Cause I'm like, we're in Detroit, and like everybody who was in the space that was leading these organizations were white people. So it's just like, now I'm like, we have a lot more of our people, doing the work and really leading the conversation. So, but I digress. Anyway, so we'll move on to messaging. So a messaging strategy is the key to successfully marketing your business. It's how you position yourself. It's your communication methods, and it influences every bit of text connected to your business, from in-store signage and advertising to customer support emails and your web presence, as you know, and social media as well. So tell me a little bit more about your messaging to our community, to our folks, and if you have found that there's certain messages or certain narratives that are more powerful and engage the community more where you are.
I guess I can go. One of the things I want to lift up is the fact that, particularly when you're talking about a gentrifying community, you have to recognize, I mean, this has always been the case, but I think it becomes even increasingly so with gentrification, how diverse the Black community is itself, right? And so the notion that you can just sort of appeal to Black people in general, I think is a somewhat limited notion. And I'll just give you one example. So I think a lot of the messaging, a lot of the messaging that we have done with Central Brooklyn Food Co-op has been very explicitly Black, to the point that Jamila was making before. I mean, I think that we're not trying to present an experience where you're just shopping for food. This is one where you belong to community, where you're part of movement, and you're part of something much larger than just a shopping experience. And in fact, you're going to have to do that if you're trying to bring in people who are going to be members, in a sense. So with our food co-op, you will have a certain amount of hours of required work. So there's sweat equity involved. So you have to put in maybe 4 hours a month of time. And so you can't just sell something like that based on just, it's going to be cheaper food, right? You've got to create a broader narrative around what you're going to get as you become a part of this. But what I've recognized is that we've been consistent in our messaging, but to the point I was making before about not all Black folks are thinking the same way. I mean, you have generational shifts, you have income shift, you have cultural shift. And, I don't like to say this, but oftentimes the young Black people who are coming into Central Brooklyn have more culturally in common with other white people their age than, say, a 60-year-old person who's been living there, for generations, right? And so, while it's important for us to put out, for instance, I showed you a flyer where we were talking about, Black radical, gathering. Not everyone is going to respond to that, right? And so what we have found, we need to calibrate that even when we go beyond food. So for instance, we consider ourselves an abolitionist organization, right? And yet there's so many Black people who have been oriented around the police that to just go into a conversation and say, we no longer want police, it's hard for people to wrap their heads around that because they associate police with safety. And so what we have to do is create a whole new conversation around what safety could look like beyond the police, but understand that, like, if you're 25 years old or 30-year-old, you're coming out of college, you're already on some level talking that language. Whereas if you're on the block association and you have community safety workshops and where you invite the police captain in, again, you have a certain orientation. And so we have to talk to you in a certain way. We have to start with where you are. So, I mean, I bring that back to food to say that we have to start with where people are and not only project sort of our messaging that works with a certain subset of the population, but in many ways have to understand the complexity of our community and be able to speak in different ways to different people. I mean, there should always be a common thread line, right? I'm not suggesting that we have one message for one person, another message for another person. There needs to be a common theme there. But it does mean that you just can't use one monolithic approach. You have to be very complex, again, in a way that mirrors the complexity of your community.
Yes.
I'll jump in. I definitely agree with Mark. In terms of messaging, one of our, key threads, because we feel like we're addressing 2 to 3 issues with the co-op as a solution. One obviously is raising the health profile of those in our community. And what all that looks like via food education programs, teaching and actually serving, delivering, but also the other conversation just around ownership, period. Like we just, say if you own part of this grocery store, you're going to treat it better. You're not going to throw trash in front of it. You're going to make sure things are neat because people take pride in what they own. And so, even the concept of ownership, is a difficult, it's not a difficult conversation, but it's that if you're not an investor or you never had a retirement plan or, you never bought a stock or share, you're starting from A. And so, we might be starting from A in the ownership conversation and starting from A and trying to raise the health profiles. But I will say that our common theme for Little Africa is love. I mean, whatever we say, if love isn't in it, what are you doing? If it don't have love in it, what you doing? And so we always reiterate the reason we're here is we love the community. We're not getting rich off of this. We've been working for free for the past 5 years. Like we're really authentically here in the community because we love the community. And so that has resonated. And I think, people, what they say, don't care what you know until they know how much you care. And so that's been one of our key themes as we bring the health and wealth and nutrition, health, wellness and nutrition conversation, as well as the ownership conversation. But we do kind of draw some boundaries. When we do meals, we just don't serve pork. That's something that Little Africa doesn't do. When you get our meals, you're not going to get that. We make sure we always have a vegetarian or vegan option. And we know that some of our older members in the community and those that are conditioned to eat in certain ways, they're not giving that stuff up. They love the fried chicken. I like some fried chicken too sometimes. But then there's other younger people. And also, I want to say COVID as a curse and a blessing and a curse, a blessing in a way that people are now paying more attention to what they're eating, like they caring a little bit more about, what they're putting in their bodies. And so that's what we're here for, is to create that alternative. But in terms of the messaging is also, I think, a consideration is the frequency in which we're putting the messages out. We can't be sporadic with it. Like when you start the conversation with the community, you have to continue that, whether it's a class, this is your social media, you're showing up doing something, like you got to stay, you have to stay on people's minds. And so messaging has to be consistent as well as, whatever that message is, but it has to have love in it. Especially in the Black community, you got to love on Black people.
Yeah. I mean, the messaging has an additive, right? In that you got to get the word out and you need people to know about what you're doing. You're communicating about your values, right? Into things that are important to your community and inviting people in to that formation, right? And simultaneously, right, it's not as though these things are static, right? That conditions aren't shifting, that, new people are coming in, people are leaving, things that, might have been important a year ago suddenly shift, right? Interests and conditions and circumstances shift. So there's this continuity too of really needing to consistently engage, right? And finding different methods and points of entry for people to stay engaged so that they're wanting to listen and receive and be receptive to your message. And that also requires, I think, our co-ops to also continuously listen, right? And to engage and to, I think one of the things that I often have seen in food co-ops is the emphasis on marketing and promotion. But marketing and promotion without outreach, right, and education is empty. It's empty. So that strategy and that investment, right, around the education and outreach side has to be attached to that side around marketing and promotion of your activities as well.
Yeah, if I could just, I want to reinforce what Jamila just said. And that's why I talked before about the organizing. That is, I think, because obviously we use social media, we use electronic media, we're very aggressive with it. But I think in this day and age, say, compared to like, say, maybe 20 years ago, it's very easy to get dependent on social media and things getting out in that way. And that can be very successful and effective, but it's going to reach, you have to understand not only the limitations of how many people it reaches, but who it reaches as well. So I think that's important. The other thing I want to just mention is that one of the impacts of gentrification is that even the term co-op itself in our neighborhood is oftentimes identified with gentrification, right? There are a few co-ops in Brooklyn already, and they are white-led and white-run. Now, we know cooperatives and cooperativism have been in our communities for generations, centuries, right? But that term has, I don't want to say it's been co-opted, but in some ways it has. It's been taken over. And so we have to also have a conversation with people about what that means, which is very difficult in a market-driven capitalistic system where everyone is seeing things in terms of you provide and I consume, and pushing back on that narrative is, you have to be very active about it.
Yes. One of the things that I struggle with sometimes, because, just like your communities, we have majority low income. So one of the things that I wanted to find out is, how do you approach those? Like, how did you approach getting their memberships? What are your membership? What is the investment number? And how do you assist those that are low income to be able to be members of your cooperative?
I'm sorry, Angela, could you ask that one more time?
Oh, yes. So I was wondering what
I was distracted by the chat. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. What is your membership entry? Like, what is the cost for membership, and how do you message the people that are in the community that are low income and maybe not be able to meet that? How are you reaching those people and getting them to be members of your cooperative?
I could take it first. So our membership share cost is a one-time $150 for the community members. We've been told that's too low, but we don't want any barrier to participation. So we offer, you can pay one or three ways. You can do the one-time $150, or we'll take 3 payments of $50, and we'll even take 10 payments of $15. And so we just try to make it easy for community members to participate. And it's not that hard to get $15 out of someone, because they'll spend that on some drinks and anything quick. And so it's really more about the people believing in you, and the messenger, as well as the message, and how we show up to get it. Some of the methods, though, that we use is also to try to maybe incentivize our members by giving away some memberships for, a certain amount of volunteering, that you've done with the co-op. And then, we also like to take a page out of Jim City's books. If, like, for them, if their members are receiving SNAP or any type of benefits, they just let them join for like $10 or something, and so, but if you have businesses and organizations, then we ask them to sponsor some of your members, and so you just use any way necessary to get them on in.
Yeah, we have very similar approach. That is, ours is $150. Part of that is a one-time, well, it's all one time, but a part of it is your membership fee. Another part is your equity. in the food co-op. And yet, you know, we don't necessarily lead with that. We made a decision internally is that we would not allow cost to be a barrier to anyone joining. And so we have a sliding scale. We have, you know, we talk about low costs that if you can't afford the food co-op, some of the alternatives we have to that. And so we've held that will not be a barrier. To the question that I think Alyssa put in there, what are the ways we're using to subsidize costs? There's one structural way we subsidize costs, and that is, as I mentioned before, the fact that we are a member worker co-op. So we are able to reduce labor costs because everyone in the food co-op has a requirement to put in a certain amount of hours. But there are other things that we're trying to do with the food co-op that go beyond food, whether it's the organizing, whether it's nutritional classes and some of the political education. All of those things are paid for through grant funding that the Brooklyn Movement Center raises. So, you know, the money that is raised through the members goes to the actual operation. And at the end of the day, we have to make more money than we're spending. But beyond what we're doing with the operations, we tie that specifically to grant as well as individual giving that we have. And because the Brooklyn Movement Center has been doing this for 10 years now, we have a pretty robust sort of relationship with philanthropy. And we've already raised several $100,000 towards the food co-op and opening as well.
Okay. I was curious, what made you all decide to do the 100% worker owned?
It was a long, drawn out conversation. You know, most people are not familiar with the model because it doesn't operate in many places. The Park Slope Food Co-op does it here in Brooklyn. And as you know, you can imagine Park Slope Food Co-op looks very different than what we're trying to build. But what we wanted to do is make sure that we did not have a class system within the food co-op, right? That people who could afford to not join and pay higher prices would shop there, and the people who couldn't afford to pay higher prices would be working, and we would create like sort of this caste system within the food co-op. And also we just wanted to make sure that we were intentional about it being a food co-op, right? I mean, I think that we were concerned that people, if they didn't have a stake in the food co-op, they would think of it like they do any other grocery store. And so we wanted to make sure that we institutionalize the sense that I'm not just shopping, I'm an owner, right? You know, and everything I do with and for the food co-op is going to come back to me as well.
I think that's really good. I didn't think anybody did that with
it's not a popular everyone has tried to argue us away from it, you know, so I have to say it's still experimental at this point.
Yeah, I mean, and that also, like, you know, there's a historic legacy of food co-ops operating like that in, you know, over time as grocery food co-ops have become more professionalized and competition in the natural foods market has increased. A lot of what we'll see is like our grocery food co-ops are just like regular grocery stores. And so a lot of the response, I think, in the pushback on continuing member worker programs is related to competition and the push tension, right? In professionalizing staff. The co-op that I worked at, we had a member worker program that was also similarly based and modeled off of what the Park Slope Food Co-op was doing. But, you know, it was a rigorous project to also keep up with administratively on the other side of that, right? Because it doesn't operate by itself. So there's other costs also associated with running that kind of a project and a program. and relational things, right? Like what happens when people don't show up for their shifts? What happens when somebody's bad at doing the thing that they're supposed to do, right? So there's a lot of, I agree. I think, you know, the opportunity to have that kind of participation is an important component of building an ethos, right? And a sense of community for your co-op when that worker, the member worker program is an option at least.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Jamila. And that is the messiness of cooperativism, right? You know, at the point you start relying on one another, then you're subject to all of our human frailties that go along with it, as opposed to someone who you're paying to do the job. And I will say, having started a credit union before, I recognize what happens when people were calling it a Black-owned bank, but it wasn't a bank, right? And by treating it like a bank, people were more susceptible to not pay back their loans because they don't have a sense of accountability that goes along with being part of a cooperative. And so for me personally, I wanted to be very intentional again about doing just what Jamila was saying, is like breaking it away from this professional culture and having it look like things that we're already familiar with, and really trying to disrupt that model and create something different.
Yes. So we've touched on so many different parts of this, and throughout the conversation, gentrification has been weaved in and out of here. So I'll just finish with a quick, just what I could say. My definition has always been a gentrification, but I'm learning that really it could be not just white folks that gentrify a community, because it just means that basically people move in that maybe have greater means. They change the culture of the neighborhood. Things start getting fixed up and new stores open. And then pretty soon you feel like you're an outsider in your own community. At least that's how I feel in downtown Detroit now. So as far as gentrification, we touch about it, but we're opening up co-ops, and it's just, I guess it's just known that a cooperative does tend to attract gentrification. Is that a bad thing? And is there anything that we can do to prevent it, or not have it be so bad for a community that we're entering with our food co-op business?
I'll respond. I know we only have I guess we have 3 minutes left in the session. So I'll be quick. I think I've evolved around my attitude about gentrification. At first, I thought it was absolutely bad when I saw, new lines in the street, new white girls with little shorts and their dogs driving down the thing, and here comes Starbucks. You've been gentrified when you got that. I don't think that elevating the assets of I now feel or understand or overstand, I don't feel like elevating the assets of a community is a bad thing. I think that's great. The bad part is when you have outsiders coming in, owning it all, and then, you don't get a piece of it. And so that's the part that we need to work on, is that we're having ownership. We're holding on to our mama's house, our grandmama's house. Don't sell it for cheap, because now they're selling, next door to $100,000, and you can't afford the upgrades. So I think part of it is also, I know we're in food cooperative, but there's housing co-ops, land co-ops. It just gets back to that. So I think raising the profile of a community to make it aesthetically beautiful, to offer more services, that's a good thing, because that stuff you can have it now in your community. But we have to have equity. That's it. We have to have equity in those changes.
Go for it, Jamila.
Yeah, I don't know, there's a whole bag right here. But it's definitely, I think what's important is that you can't be in denial about it. There's an association, as Mark alluded to, of what a co-op could potentially mean, or like even you mentioning it, and it's a turnoff because of people's perceptions of particularly food co-ops, right? So I think there's accountability that food co-ops as a business needs to have as a steward of its community, and really being in relationship to the community that it's in. And so, you know, really thinking about some of those co-op principles around concern for community, cooperation amongst cooperatives are some of the kinds of value lenses that we can put onto how we operationalize the work that the co-ops do to help mitigate some of those kinds of impacts against gentrification. Because kind of, I don't know that you can get rid of it necessarily, but you can own your position in it, and you can operationalize how not to contribute in some ways.
Yes.
In the minute we have left, I'll just say that for a long time, the conversation around gentrification has been debilitating and disempowering. And what we're doing and what other people are doing is just a form of taking our power back and saying, you know, we're not here to be your victims, to be the people pushed out. You know, we're gonna take a fucking stand, excuse the expression, and we're not gonna, you know, we're not gonna go. And if we do go, we sure as hell ain't gonna be quietly. And so I think a food co-op can represent exactly that.
I love that. I love we are taking our power back. That's, you know,
Well, now.
I'm going to quote you and use that because that's what I mean, you know, it's a struggle sometimes when you're living in these communities because, you know, then you have so many different people and you want to, you know, be welcoming and embrace everyone. But you know that what you're doing might not be the thing that, you know, will bring everybody to your space and make everybody feel welcome. But hopefully, because we're all Black led in Black communities, and like you said, Mark, I can't believe that your community is being, you know, taken over like this. Because I remember, I mean, it's been a while, but I remember going there, and it would be a shock to me, just like when I went to visit my grandfather's place in Harlem. It was shocking. So I'm sure that, you know, that little piece of whatever is coming our way, and I'm not looking forward to it, but we're going to do what we can. We're going to hold on to what we can and continue moving forward. So I just want to thank all of you. This was fantastic. I know that there are going to be people that watch this after, you know, we're done, and hopefully they'll be able to gain some more information, and especially the history and the contributions that all of you have made to this movement. So I want to thank you, Angela. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jamila. And I wish it wasn't over, but ahora, pa'lante, como decimos en Puerto Rico.
Peace.
Peace, y'all.
Gracias.
Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Blessings.
I'm gonna try to come tonight. I don't know. We'll see the little gathering we're having. So
Okay, cool.
Yeah, much more to come.
adios. Bye.